A case of secrets and suspicion confront him. I never met the man, Leslie Goring said, her voice calm but tinged with irritation. Jillian wouldn't allow, it claimed it'd only make things messier. Then, how'd you spot him at the funeral? I asked, easing back in my chair, arms crossed. At first, I didn't, she admitted, but I asked around. He introduced himself to one of her friends, used a fake name, I'm pretty sure. That photo I showed you, found it later, hidden in Jillian's belongings. Wolfe, seated like a mountain behind his desk, gave a slight nod, eyes half closed. What exactly do you seek, Miss Goring? I need to know if he killed her, she said, her voice dropping low. Oh, if she was being blackmailed, stalked maybe, all of it. You leap to crime without proof, Wolfe said, his tone flat but weighted. I leap to fear, she replied softly. And a woman doesn't just tumble downstairs for nothing. Wolfe shifted an event rarer than a comet for a man his size. Miss Goring, I don't chase shadows. My time is costly, and one requires facts, not fancies. Give me one solid fact that this man, Havens, threatened your sister. Kay. She reached into her purse and pulled out a torn envelope, sliding it across the desk. Kaylian mailed this to herself, postmarked 3 days before she died. Inside's a copy of that list. Someone opened it before it got to her. She taped it shut, and in her handwriting, she wrote, if they find me, start with the names. I picked up the envelope, examining it. The tear was rough, intentional. The handwriting was clear, urgent. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction, his eyes sharpening. You should have shown this first, he said. Fair point, I cut in, glancing at her. We don't exactly trust every stranger who walks in. Wolfe tapped his chair's arm. Archie, keep the envelope. Tomorrow, confirmed the handwriting. Visit Jillian's building in Carroll Gardens. Speak to the superintendent. Gain access to her apartment. Look for signs of forced entry, past or present. He turned to Leslie. Return tomorrow at 4 p.m. She stood. You're taking the case? No, Wolfe said. I'm testing its merit. That's different. She gave a curt nod. Good enough for now. After she left, I lingered in the doorway, envelope in hand. She's scared. Wolfe murmured. This means we're dealing with truth, hysteria, or both. By 4 a.m. I was headed to Jillian Goring's old place in Carroll Gardens, a beat-up brownstone with a cracked stoop and a mailbox that looked like it had seen better days. The super, Leon, was a wiry guy with the personality of a rusty nail and breath that could wilt flowers. He let me into the unit after I flashed my license and dropped Wolfe's name like a magic word. Apartment 2D was a 2-bedroom. It's clean but uneasy, like its owner had left in a rush. Unread books, a wine glass by the sink, a scarf still hanging. On a hook, I snapped photos, rifled through drawers. No struggle, no diary, no confessions scribbled on napkins, but on the kitchen counter sat a glass dish of dried lavender. And nestled inside was a key with a pink tag labeled storage. I pocketed it and asked Leon about it on my way out. That's for the basement storage, he said. Jillian kept dance props and costumes down there. You want to see? 5 minutes later, I was in the basement brick walls. One flickering bulb, a row of padlocked lockers. Jillian's, labeled Goring, opened with the key. Inside, theater junk shoes, fabric, a folding mirror, but buried under rehearsal. Schedules was a black portfolio stuffed with contracts, design mock-ups, and invoices, most tied to a name, Tennyson Marchand. It tickled something in my memory. Back in the car, I called Wolfe. He listened quietly until I mentioned the lavender dish. That's the detail that matters, he said. A personal choice, significant or trivial, return immediately. When I got back, Saul Panzer was in Wolfe's office, looking like a mild-mannered accountant, but a radiating quiet skill. Nodded as I entered. Wolfe gestured for Saul to brief me. Peter Havens exists, Saul said, but he's slippery. Works part-time for a food consultancy called Brand-Minded, lives in a Fort Greene condo, lease in his name, rent paid by Jersey Shell LLC, tied to Tennyson Marchand. Wolfe stirred. Saul went on. Marchand's a former chef, now a culinary investor. Made a name with a pop-up, salt thread fancy plating, fake farm vibes, quit cooking 2 years ago. Now backs trendy restaurants by charming, desperate talent. I pulled out the portfolio. His name's all over this. He and Jillian were planning something here in catering. Maybe. Jillian as the creative, Marchand as the cash. Saul nodded. One more thing. Havens was married once. Briefly. Ex-wife's Rowan Bain, a chef blacklisted 3 years ago after a scandal over stolen recipes. Wolfe's eyes flicked up. Stolen recipes, accused of lifting menus from another chef, Saul said. Guess who? Tennyson Marchand. Long silence settled. Wolfe laced his fingers over his stomach. We have Marchand, the aspiring tycoon. Havens, his agent. Jillian, the dreamer. And Rohan Bain, the disgraced chef. All circling food, ambition, and betrayal. I nodded. 4 people with reasons to lie. Maybe kill. Wolfe pointed to the phone. Fight them here tomorrow, 4 p.m., one by one. That afternoon, I started tracking them down. Peter Havens answered his door shirtless, smirking like he was the star of his own movie. He denied knowing Jillian well, said he went to her funeral out of respect, claimed the casserole was a dish she made at a business dinner. When I asked if he had keys to her place, he laughed. I'm not a creep. I smiled. That's not what the ladies at the funeral said. Tennyson Marchand was slicker, meeting me in a showroom for some overpriced knives he was peddling. Jillian and I had a partnership, he said. She had talent, but was reckless. The catering plan fizzled when she backed out after I pushed for control. He sent flowers when she died, didn't think more was needed. Mentioning Rowan Bain made his jaw tighten. She's a liability. Bring her up again, and I'll call my lawyers. Rowan Bain, working at a Red Hook cafe, poured coffee like it personally offended her. Marchand stole from me, she said. Ideas, techniques, plating, everything. When I called him out, he sixed his lawyers on me. She hadn't talked to Jillian in a year, but remembered her, caught between ambition and fantasy, anxious. Spot. I checked in with Leslie Goring that evening. She looked shaken when I mentioned Rowan Bain. I didn't know she was involved, she said. Jillian never told me. Why? Because Jillian wanted it to work. She hid truths that might break her dreams. Back at the brownstone, I typed up notes and spread the files on Wolfe's desk. He studied them in silence, then exhaled. This isn't a random act. It's a performance, calculated, not impulsive. I leaned forward. Not about money? No, Archie, Wolfe said, eyes glinting. Pride. If Wolfe's the brain, I'm the legs, the ears, and sometimes the fists, though I don't swing unless someone's begging for it. But when it comes to digging through lies and secrets, that's where I earn my keep. This case was starting to feel like a recipe for trouble, and we were just getting to the main course. Between smiles and catching lies dressed in fancy punctuation. I'm your man, which is show. I found myself back in Brooklyn. Forenoon the next day, checking out details too small for Wolfe to suffer, but too important to ignore first stop Jillian's building gag. This time, I went digging into the comings and goings. The Super Leon seemed more relaxed now that he understood I wasn't with the city or anyone holding a clipboard. Listen, said, scratching at a patch of stubble that looked permanent. She was a nice girl, quiet, clean, paid early. Anyone else have a key to her place besides her? He shrugged. You'd have to ask her, but I only saw one guy coming by regular, tall, nice clothes. Not her boyfriend, though. different vibe to smooth events could. Had Ben, did he ever go down to the basement? Leon blinked, as if it hadn't occurred to him anyone would voluntarily enter the basement. Once Mabe was carrying a box that tracked dead. Jillian seemed scared to you. He hesitated last couple weeks. Yeah. Jumpier kept asking about security. Want to talk now? If I'd seen anyone hanging around, that was the most useful thing he'd said so. I thanked him, slipped him a 10, and headed out next on the docket was Tennyson Martian's office, or what heckled his culinary brand studio, which turned out to be a former warehouse converted into a high-ceiling mess of color swatches, cookware, mock-ups, ambient photographs of food, styled within an inch of its life. He welcomed me in like a host greeting a food critic, complete with over-prawn pronounced French and a curated playlist off jazz. He thought made him look deep. I smiled through it and asked questions. Shan, did you and Jillian last speak? He leaned back, folding his hands like a professor in a European. Drama about a month before she died. She wanted to pull out. Said she was worried about optics. She thought the venture would look like a vanity project. He said, rolling high size, which it was not. I was investing real capital. She, on the other hand, began talking about wealth theft. My ears perked us and stealing from her. No, he said, quickly, as in someone stealing from mesh, believed. Someone had access to our shared files and was leaking ideas. She thought it was Haven's. And was it hard to say? He said, face-tight Peter is loyal but slippery. He tends to hover at the edge of things, never quite inside theorem, but always within earshot. I noted that. Then I asked the big one, did y'all kill her? He blinked. Pardon, you heard me. He gave a dry short law. Goodwin, you're not very subtle, neither's gravity. And that's what killed her, according to the NYPD. Moran frowned. I did not kill Heron. The idea, who might have? He leaned forward, suddenly sincere. Jillian had secrets. She wanted this business to cleanse her past, not reveal it. But if you want a motive, you might try asking Rowan. She loathed that Jillian had my trust. It was a dodge, but a good one. Rowan Bain was next. I found her at the Red Hook Cafe, this time alone in the prep area, arms, elbow deep in pastry down. She didn't look thrilled to see me. What now? She said, slapping flour onto the counter. You were right. Martian's name is on every piece of Jillian's business plans, but so is yours in the metadata. She froze. Jillian used lot F design, templates, menus, pitch decks, branding. Copy the originals, they're yours, from your website. 3 years ago, her mouth thinned into a line. She lifted from you, and then she partnered with that guy who torpedoed your career. How does that feel? Poetic, she said. After a B10 stupid, she wanted something so badly, she borrowed a blueprint from a broken house. But did you threaten her? No, I warned her in 2 weeks before Sheddied. Okay. I told her Martian would gut her, that Havens was his errand boy, that ish. Thought she could control them. She was delusional. And did you push her down the stairs? She gave me a long look. No, but Kay know what it looks like when someone falls for something they can't control. I left her to her pastry and made one last stop. Peter Havens, predictably, was more receptive when I said I had new questions. This time, he wore a button-down and cologne, as if prepping for a different kind of interview. Villian was talented, he said, as I took a seat, but naive. She didn't understand Lavier. Yours or Moran's? He smiled faintly. Both. Did you help her or spy on her? I offered her a route, he said, like a guru selling vague inspiration. She didn't take it. Y'all could beat her keys. No proof. She mailed herself a list of names you were on. I have shrugged. She was paranoid. Ambition can look like betrayal when you're scared. Were you scared? He didn't answer that. Back at the brownstone, gave Wolfe the rundown. He listened, as usual, without moving much beyond the occasional eyebrow twitch at the end of my report. He asked only one question. What color was the lavender dish? I blinked blue. The cobalt. More or less, he nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something. Then he picked up the envelope. Jillian had mailed to herself Archie. He said, gather them all. For yes, Tomorrow, 4 o'clock. You've solved it. No, he said, but I have to find its perimeter now. I will shape its center. The next morning started like most at the brownstone Fritz, preparing breakfast with the solemnity of a priest arranging incense. Wolfe in his chair reading the Gazette with a scowl that suggested the world was beneath correction, and me sipping coffee while reviewing the dossier we'd compiled on our colorful quartet of suspects. What didn't start like a normal morning was what happened. Just after 10 o'clock, I was in the front room reading the police report on Julian Goring's accidental death, fourth time, when I heard Fritz bark a rare event and the sudden clatter of something ceramic in the kitchen. That bark is Fritz's version of a 4-alarm fire. I bolted in just in time to catch the tail end of a disaster. The kitchen window was open. That may not seem dramatic to you, but in this house, windows are not opened, especially not that one, and especially not without a mission. On the counter below it, the blue and white ceramic salt, Cellar Wolfe's preferred for finishing dishes, was tipped over, salt everywhere. No other signs of intrusion, no broken glass, no footprints, but Fritz was pale and swearing in Alsatian, which meant this was personal. What happened? I asked, scanning the room. I stepped away for 6 minutes, snapped to refill the lard bins. When K returned, the window was opened in that he gestured wildly at the spilled salt. Was like this wolf, summoned it immediately. Arrived like a man approaching a funeral. He stood in the doorway, took one look at the mess. Andrew, in a long, frosty breath, who opened that window. He said, as if addressing attribunal. Fritz straightened. I did not. I don't care who didn't. I care who did. He checked the latch. It wasn't broken, but it had been forced, not shattered, not cracked, but clearly opened with purpose. There's no way this was wind or accident, Ty said, and no one's gotten past the front door or rear without us knowing. Wolfe turned on his heel and returned to the office. I followed. This is not intrusion, he said, settling heavily into his chair. It is declaration. You think it was a message? I think someone is telling us that our sanctuary is vulnerable. The trespass was subtle, too subtle for theft, or careful for violence, but not careful enough to go unnoticed, which means it was meant to be noticed. He looked toward the hallway. Did you remove the salt? No, just cleaned the spill. He nodded. Don's sleeve. I wanted observed until after 4. That was when our guests were redo. The hours passed, and tight coils. Wolfe refused his second beer. Fritz made lunch bid. Didn't eat. I checked the locks 3 times. The salt stayed put and touched undisturbed, symbolic as a murder weapon in a Greek play at 3:58. The suspects began to arrive. Peter Havens came first, pressed Slack's cool smirk, the air of Eamon about to bluff. Through a poker hand, Rowan Bain arrived next, tired ice flower on her collar and a chip on her shoulder, big enough too. Seasoned Stu Tennyson and Moran swept in like he owned the room. Trailing ego like a cologne. Leslie Goring came last. She looked pale, controlled, and some thingles like she knew she was here for the final act and hoped it wouldn't be hers. Wolfe did not rise. He rarely does, but his presence grew with every word he didn't say. Thank you for accepting my invitation, he said at last. I have convened you because lives through design or coincidence intersected with that of Gillian Goring in ways that now demand explanation. He turned slightly toward Murchie. Locked the front door. I did. It wasn't theater. It was policy. Wolfe looked at the group. Let us begin with clarity, he said. Gillian Goring died 3 weeks. A gaffron, a fall. The police deemed it accidental, but a piece of correspondence mailed by Gillian to herself shortly before her death suggested otherwise. That letter listed 4 names. Yours. There were no protests. That was interesting. Each of you had contact with her in the weeks prior to her death. Each of you, in some form, had motive, envy, fear, leverage, or damage control. Rowan crossed her arms. Havens looked away. Martian scratched at his jaw. Leslie stayed still. Wolfe continued, but motive alone does not suffice. What matters is opportunity and the trespass. He paused this morning. Someone entered this house through the kitchen window. They did not take anything. They did not harm anyone. They spilled salt and left Martian raised an eyebrow. So Wolfe leaned forward a quarter inch. So, Mr. Martian, someone wanted me to know they could get close, that they were not afraid, and that, like Jillian, I might be watched. Leslie shifted in her seat. You think it's connected? I do. Wolfe gestured to the items on his desk. Miss Bain, several documents in Jillian's Paulsonson were adapted from your original templates. I confirmed the source files. Did you know? I suspected. Said, but I didn't press. I'd been burned once by Martian. I wasn't eager to invite him back into my life, yet you visited Jillian's building 2 weeks before her death. She blinked. How do you? She told the superintendent. Someone had been watching her. He recalled a woman with dark hair and boots. Rowan flushed. He went there to warn her not to threaten her. A Wolfe said, and what did you warn her about? Rowan's eyes flicked toward Morand, that she was in over her head. She was being used. Martian scoffed. Please, she was ambitious. She knew the game. Wolfe turned his gaze to him. Indeed, in what game were you playing, Martian? I offered her a brand, a platform, a mold. Wolfe cut in. You offered her a mold, and when she started resisting, pulling back, you activated. Mr. Havenshavens opened his mouth, then shut it. Again, you visited her building 4 times in the final week of her life, Wolfe said, voice like stone. Each time you left nothing behind, but presents no texts, no emails, no paper trail, but you were there. That's not a crime, Haven said. No, Wolfe agreed, but it is a pattern. He paused. Jillian mailed herself a letter because she feared her files were being accessed. Someone she believed was trying to write her narrative to make her look unstable, paranoid, to discredit her before Shever exposed them. Wolfe looked at Leslie. Miss Gorin, you were her closest contact, but you did not know the full extent of her involvement. Why? Leslie answered in a whisper. Because she didn't trust me. Either not entirely. No, she feared if she told you everything you might interfere. You were her sister, but also her anchor, and she was trying toughly. Wolfe laced his fingers. The trespass here, like the one in her apartment, was aidist, and the message was, I can reach you anytime I want. He looked around and that leaves us with a question. One of you sent that message's lengths, thick and ripe, but Wolfe only said, we will reconvene shortly. Until then, I ask you not to speak to one another. He pressed a buzzer. I opened the door. Fritz guided the 4 of them to the front room. As they filed out, Wolfe muttered, Archie, the true performance is about to begin. There's a special kind of silence that settles over the Brownston wind. It's filled with suspects pretending they're not being watched. It's the kind of silence where a cough sounds like a confession, and the creak of a floorboard could be mistaken for Apple's door cocking. That's what we had on our hands after Wolfe dismissed the quartet to the front room for very different people, all trying not to reveal whether they'd been the one to spill salt in the sanctum. Wolfe didn't speak for a full 5 minutes after the door closed. He just sat, eyes half-lidded, fingertips pressed together, as still as a Buddha with indigestion. Shall I guess which one of them is going to crack first? I said no. He said, you shall call Saul Panzer now. I didn't argue. I phoned Saul, who answered on the first ring like the professional he is. Tell him, Wolfe said, to retrieve a copy of this ambulance footage from the corner deli across from Gillian Goring's building last 10 days before her death. He went to the delivery window's mail slot and front entrance reviewed. Done. Saul Sedin, specific. Yes, I want to know who handled her mail, and if anyone tampered with it. Mail tampering. It wasn't the kind of aftertale that would catch a cop's attention, but for Wolfe, it was like finding a misaligned comma in a forget confession. After I hung up, he finally looked at me. The envelope Leslie brought it was mailed from the local box 3 blocks from Gillian's apartment, postmarked 2 days before her death rite, and opened, then resealed before delivery, which means someone else got to it. Yes, and someone had to know it existed. You'd think they followed her, saw her posted. Wolfe shook his head. Too conspicuous. No, Archie, someone intercepted it. after it entered the mail system, which means someone with accessor, someone who lives in that building. That narrowed it, but not enough. I didn't bother asking him who he suspected. Wolfe doesn't share suspicions. He hands out facts only when they're baked to perfection. Never before at 3:30, I stepped into the front room to check on our guest. The scene looked like a badly written one-act play about distrust. Martian lounging with false nonchalance events, scrolling his phone, Rowan pretending not to study everyone's posture, and Leslie sitting with her arms crossed and her mind clearly far away. Everything good in here, I said with my friendliest voice. To find good, Rowan snapped. Peaceful, I said, tense silence, minimal stabbing. I don't like being kept in the dark. Martian muttered. You're in Wolfe's house, he reminded him. Darkness is his lighting scheme. Back in the office, Wolfe was finishing a phone call, one of his rare personal ones with Inspector Kramer. Thought meant things were heating up. He hung up, steepled his fingers inside. Told him nothing, Wolfe said, but Kramer will be calling again soon. He smells something. If it's anything like the casserole, might kill him. Wolfe ignored that archifetch, the envelope. Kai. He stared at it for a long time, as if waiting for it to confess. Then, it was never meant to be read, huh? It was. Insurance symbolic. Jillian didn't want the contents to reach anyone, only that the envelope exist to be discovered. She expected Sami intercepted, that was the point. But she didn't know it would survive. No, that was luck or incompetence. He paused. Archie, bring me her. Sisterly entered the office slowly, as if worried the floor might give way under her. She sat stiffly, hands folded in her lap. Miss Goring, Wolfe said, I have a question of unusual delicacy. Go ahead. Did your sister stop trusting you? Her eyes didn't change, but her breath. I don't know, she said. She was secretive, not paranoid exactly, and but close, she said. I wouldn't understand what she was doing. She feared your judgment. I think she feared disappointment. Jillian wanted to succeed without leaning on me. Did you ever argue? She hesitated. Yes, about Peter Havens. He told her he was a leech. And how did she respond? She shut down Leslie. Said, completely. Did you follow her after that? No. Did you try to warn anyone? No. Did Ja want her? Her apartment, after her death. That one hit like a slap. What you arrived at the scene before the police. You told me you spoke to the superintendent, but Head did not recall seeing you that day. She flushed. I used her spare key. I needed to know what she left behind. Wolfe nodded. Then you may have unwittingly compromised evidence. I didn't touch anything, but you looked for something. Silence. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. What did you hope to find, Miss Goring? A reason? She whispered something to Tom. She didn't give up something to prove someone else made her fall. Did you find it? She shook her head. Slow, Lionel. Then perhaps, Wolfe said. Someone removed it first at 4:20. The buzzer rang. Saul had arrived. I brought him in. Wolfe dismissed Leslie, then turned to Saul. You have something? I do, Saul said, sliding a folder onto Wolfe's desk. 20 nights before Jillian's death, a man entered her building at 1:43 a.m. left at 2:10. No packages, no visitors logged, but he paused at the mailbox cluster. Heavens, no, Saul said. Martian. I whistled. Can you prov? He accessed her mail. No, but the angle shows his hand near her slot. On his face, clear as day, he wasn't delivering anything, just hovering. Wolfe closed his eyes. That suffices. Do we tell Kramer? Not yet. Wolfe waited 10 more minutes. Then he summoned them all again. They entered with the same expressions as before, only now shaded with just a hint more wariness. We're beginning to understand. This was not a parlor game. Wolfe didn't rise. He didn't clear his throat. He simply began speaking. Miss Goring feared betrayal. She encoded her fear in a letter one Shek knew might not survive, one that would implicate, but not indict. She suspected Simi was rewriting her future behind her back. He glanced at Martian. Yao entered her building that night to retrieve the letter. You failed, but your intention was clear. Martian stiffened. you can't prove that I don't need to. Not yet. He turned to Havens. You were her shadow, not her partner. You manipulated her, gently made her believe its presence meant progress, all while you relayed her doubts to Moran, to Rowan. You warned her, but it was too late, and your warning, while well meant, was not enough to stop the machine. And finally, to Leslie, you want justice. That's admirable. But you must accept that your sister kept things from you, including the scale of what she was up against. He paused. I have everything I need. You wouldn't think a man who moves only between chair, dining table, and orchid room could control a room like a puppeteer with strings tucked behind his words. But that's exactly what Nero Wolfe does. And the hour after that second group meeting broke up, Wolfe was moving persuasively like a grandmaster who already knew how the match would end. I've seen him do it before, but this time, it was more surgical. At 5:10 p.m., he instructed me to escort each suspect to the door, one by one. Not together, not with civility, one by one. First was Peter Havens. You may tell Mr. Havens, Wolfe said, that I will be. Reaching out to his employer, that should set him on edge. It did when I opened the door for him. I leaned in a little. Wolfe said, you might want to start polishing your resume. He blinked. What he's going to talk to? Marshall? No, I mean your actual employer, the LLC in Jersey, that pays your rent. The faintest color drained from his face. I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course not. That's why. Wolfe he left with that kind of stride that starts fast and ends slower, like a man realizing, too late, that he doesn't know where he's going. Next came Rowan Bain. Miss Bain, Wolfe said before. I walked her out. A word of avicito. Not destroyed the backup hard drive you keep in your apartment. Kay, it may be the only thing keeping you out of handcuffs. Ron stared at him. I haven't committed a crime. No, Wolfe agreed, but someone will suggest. You have. Be ready. She left, tight-lipped, her boots striking the hallway. Like punctuation marks, Marchand came third. Wolfe didn't look at him. Hedge spoke into the stillness. Mr. Two Marchand, I wonder, when does a performance become a confession? Marchand tilted his head. When the audience is too clever. No, Wolfe said. When the performance size too perfect. I didn't need to open the door for Marshall. He knew how to exit the stage. That left Leslie. Wolfe was gentler with her. Not warm, he never is, but measured. You will return tomorrow, he said, and Yao will be told everything. She nodded. You know who did it? Yes. Will you tell the police if necessary? Wolfe said. But first, I will tell you. Then you may decide whether justice requires an arrest or simply the truth. That shudder up the brownstone felt cleaner after they were gone. Even though none of them had touched a thing, Wolfe remained in his chair. I sat across from him and waited for the rest of the orchestration. It came soon enough. I once saw to shadow Havens overnight, he said, discreet but present. See if he visits Marshall. Done then. I want you, he added, pointing a finger like it owed him. Onedo visit Miss Bain's apartment. Early tomorrow, bring her pastries. Excuse mash, we'll be baking. Bring coffee. Be courteous. Ask her to talk. She will. And what am? I'm listening for a misstep, Wolfe said. Something casual, something petty, something that proves she knew Jillian had mailed the envelope before it was mentioned in this house. I gave him a long look. So she's the one? No, he said, but I want to know how close she came. And Marchand believes he is still in control. Let him. He will try to buy Havens' silence or loyalty. Saul will confirm, which, and Leslie, she will be our witness to what? To the moment Mariscontrol unravels the next morning began with pastries. Specifically, warm apple turnovers, and me standing outside Rowan Bain's Brooklyn walk-up like I was bringing peace offerings to a territorial bobcat. She answered in flour-smeared overalls and a suspicious squint. I don't talk to visitors before 9 o'clock a.m., she said. It's 9:06. I replied, handing her the box, and I brought cinnamon that earned me an eyebrow and a reluctant step aside. kitchen was a war zone of sugar flour and precise chaos pans on the rack, butter softening in the corner, and a laminated list of spoon ratios pinned to the fridge. I mad at coffee. She didn't stop me. We talked about the cafe, about pastry trends, about politics of sourdough. Then she slipped. She was describing a recipe she had made with Gillian, some kind of delicate sea salt chocolate tart. Winch said she was always putting weird things in envelopes. I told her someone would intercept one eventually. I set my cup down. You told her that she froze. I assumed she had this fear of people looking through her things, but you just said you told her she didn't answer, and that was enough. Back at the brownstone, Saul had returned last night, said Havens visited Archie's condo at 11:17 p.m. Stayed 12 minutes. When he left, he had an envelope in his hand. What kind? Wolfe asked. Thick, manila, closed, with a string bribe or blackmail. Saul shrugged. Hard to tell. Wolfe nodded. But perhaps by late afternoon, all 4 suspects were back in the office. This time Wolfe didn't ask questions. He didn't play his usual game of slowly dismantling lies until the only thing left standing was guilt. He just told a story. A young woman begins a business venture, he said, one involving money, image, and most dangerously, collaborationships, idealistic but smart. She realizes too late that her partners are neither trustworthy nor transparent. She begins documenting things obsessively, list records, names, not to expose them, not yet, but to prepare. Then something changes. A confrontation. She pulls back. One partner becomes nervous. He has lied about fences. Another feels betrayed her intellectual property, borrowed, perhaps stolen. A third fears being cut out and tries to control the narrative. One night Samine enters her building, opens her mailbox, retrieves a letter, but he is seen not by a witness, but by a camera, and he fails to find the original. The woman has mailed a second copy elsewhere. Days later, she dies, not in anger, not in panic, but in quiet, practiced malice. She's pushed or startled or misled, and the death is ruled an accident. But the game is not over. The sister appears with a casserole, and the machine begins. Tape breakdown. Silence followed, the kind that comes before a confession or a breakdown. Wolfe turned his gaze to Marchand. You killed her, he said. You had to ouch. She would have exposed you to your investors. She knew the money wasn't real. Kitchen leases were fake. Havens was your handler, not hers. She was going Togo public. Marchand didn't move. You confronted her. She rejected you. You went back. You threatened her again, and this time she laughed. Wolfe's voice. Loretti did not plan to kill her, but pride is a sharp thing. Stood Marchand. Sharper than a knife. Marchand stood slowly. You have no proof? I don't need proof, Wolfe said. I have pattern, motive, and fear, and your associate. Mr. Havens is beginning to feel expendable. Heads turned to Havens. He blinked twice. Then, he said, he pushed her. Rowan let out a sharp breath. Leslie gasped. And Marchand didn't deny it. There's a moment right after a man's name is dropped like a stone into a quiet room when everything freezes, not because anyone expects a dramatic outburst, not in Wolfe's office sites, the kind of room where theatrics fall flat and truth hangs like smoke reeling into corners you didn't even know were watching. Peter Havens had just said plainly and without theatrics, he wished her that tisted. Was it the whole thing for syllables that cracked the case like an egg on a skillet? Wolfe didn't gloat. He didn't shift. He didn't even blink. He just said, sit, Mr. Havens. Havens sat. Tennyson. Marchand didn't. He stood like he wasn't sure whether to bolt or give a tad. Talk. His jaw was tight, his fists tighter. This is ridiculous, he said, trying for indignant, but landing somewhere between sweaty and hollow. You're taking his word over mine. No, Wolfe replied. I'm taking his reluctance over your certainty. That is the difference, Marchand sneered, easily. Covering for someone else, he's been obsessed with Gillian for months. Wolfe sighed. Mr. Havens is many things. Weak, ambitious, servile, but not loyal. Hazards, the nearest power source. And that is no longer you, Martian turned to Haverns. You idiot. Do you have any idea what you've done? Haverns looked down at these hands. Yeah, said softly. I think I finally did something right. Rowan Baines, seated across from them, let out a quiet exhale. Not a sigh, not relief, just ear finally allowed to leave Leslie. Goring hadn't spoken, her expression hadn't changed since the moment Wolfe said, "You killed her." Now she leaned forward and asked quietly, "Why?" The room held its breath. Martian blinked at her, like she just asked why rain falls or fire burns. Like it was the wrong question altogether. She was going to ruin everything he said, voice taut after. Everything I invested, after all, I risked to get her there. She was going to blow it up. She was ungrateful. She AY'd him. "Owed you, Leslie." Echoed, "I made her," he said. "I gave her a name, a platform she wanted to go solo, right when the real money was coming in. She didn't get to walk away and take the brand with Hurlsley. Sat back. She didn't cry, didn't shake, but her silence changed color, like something had hardened behind her eyes. Wolfe, meanwhile, let the post stretch. He always does this, gives a man enough time to hear himself. Then he said, "She didn't owe you, she owed herself. And when she saw what you were, she wrote it down, names, motives, weaknesses, and she mailed it, not for justice, not even for protection, but to ensure someone else will ask questions. If she died," she tripped. Martian snapped. "You can't prevail the wise." "No," Wolfe said, "but that's the beauty of intellectual justice. Mermassant, I don't need a weapon or fingerprints or a confession. I need only motive means, and fear yours is all over the room." Wolfe buzzed me. I stood, left the office, made a call to Inspector Kramer. The good inspector is never thrilled to hear my voice, but the moment I said the words "unlawful death" and "potential confession," his tone shifted. He said he'd be there in 20 minutes with backup 3. The time I returned to the office, Wolfe had begun his final maneuver, the kind where he doesn't speak so much as conduct, directing conversation like an orchestra, pulling tensions tighter until even the air feels knotted. "Miss Bain," he said, "you suspected Saming was coming." "I warned her," she replied. "Yes, but too late, and you didn't intervene when it counted. You were angry, and perhaps vindicated." Rowan didn't deny it. She knew what he was. She chose to believe in potential over precedent. That's not a crime, but it's a hell of a mistake. Anna, Wolfe asked. She met his eyes. "Now I know what potential can cost." Wolfe turned to Havens. "You delivered her to him." "I didn't think it would go that far." "Of course not," Wolfe said. "No one ever does." Leslie looked at him. "Why didn't you stop it sooner?" "I couldn't," he said. "Not until I understood what I was seeing." Jillian left us a trail knot of what happened, but what she feared, that Kindorf breadcrumb, only makes sense after the wolf has eaten. She didn't like the metaphor. Neither did I, but it stuck. Wolfe and Allie addressed Moran again. "I cannot charge you, but others can, and Wilma Goodwin has summoned the police." Martian chuckled, sharp and empty. "You're going to let them handle this. They already ruled it an accident." "And now," Wolfe said, "coolly tell, have cause to reclassify." "I'll walk you, May." Wolfe agreed, "but your clients will not follow. Your partners will not return. Your brand will not survive scrutiny that landed." Martian sat down and said nothing more. Inspector Kramer arrived at 5:23 in a bad mood and a better suit than usual. He listened as Wolfe laid it out from the spilled salto. The envelope from Saul's surveillance, fine to Havens' mission. Kramer didn't interrupt. That's rare. But when it was over, he stood still for a long time. Damn, muttered. "You just sat here and cracked the whole thing." "I did," Wolfe replied. "It is after all my profession." Kramer eyed Havens. "Y'all willing to put that in a statement?" Havens nodded slowly. "Yeah, to cover yourself, to get clear," he said finally. Kramer grunted. "Well, see." He signaled to his men. Martian didn't protest when they cuffed him as they let him out. Wolfe closed his eyes, not in triumph, in calculation. Rowan left without a word. Leslie stayed behind after Kramer and his team cleared out. Wolfe and I remained in the office, The silence was different now. Heavier, but not tense. Just full. Leslie stood by the desk. "I should thank you," she said. "Yo May Wolfe," said she, smiled faintly. "But I won't. Not yet." He opened his eyes. "No matter. You have what you needed," she nodded. "Not justice, but the truth. And sometimes, Wolfe," said, "the difference is a casserole." That almost got a laugh out of me. Almost. She left a moment later. No drama, no tears. It's quiet, close related that evening over lamb with rosemary and spring vegetables. I asked Wolfe what he'd meant by that. He set down his fork. The dish was paid. "But not just for me, you mean, Marshall?" "Yes." He knew she'd cooked it before at some shared dinner. It was symbolic, a way to show he could be close. Leslie mirrored it, showing us to that part, consciously or not. And the salt, I asked control. He seed a small violation to show how easily rules could be broken. I thought about that. Then I said, "You know, there are worse crimes than murder." "Yes," Wolfe said. "There is vanity and ambition without restraint, and believing that one may another's potential." He reached for his peer. Fortunately, all of them can be exposed. It wasn't often that Nero Wolfe staged a third gathering of suspects in a single case. Once, maybe twice, in all the years I worked for him, he always prefers his climax to land once clean, decisive, and free of the kind of dramatic padding you get in lesser minds. But this thing with Gillian Goring was different. The police had their man, Kramer had his statement. But Wolfe still had a knot he needed to untie, not for the courts. Psych, for his own thoughts. How I found myself the next day standing in the office doorway as Wolfe made one last call. "Miss Goring," he said. Team took the phone. "You may come now. There is more to be said." She arrived 23 minutes later. No makeup, no tears, just a cool, flatted steadiness that suggested she hadn't slept, but also hadn't broken some people fall apart after. Grief. Leslie Goring seemed to have calcified. Wolfe, still in his chair, gestured for her tacit. He'd laid out nothing on his desk, no evidence, no files, no fanfare, just his mint, and unfortunately for her, a few unanswered questions. "Miss Goring," he said, "I must trouble you with an unpleasant theory. I am used to those by now. Goodwin will understand when I say that while I am convinced Tennyson Martian caused your sister's death." The question remains how she frowned. He pushed her yes. Wolfe said, "But I've begun to believe was not a spontaneous act of rage. I believe it was planned, staged to look spontaneous, stage not only for appearances, but for you that rocked her back an inch." What Wolfe went on, "Your sister sent you a letter. It arrived after her death with a list of names. You brought it to me?" She nodded, for she sent the letter with one assumption, that it might be intercepted. She had begun to fear surveillance. She even told her superintendent that she thought someone was inside her apartment, but she did not confront the person directly. She documented. Quiet, lip reposely. Leslie nodded. She was scared. "Yes," Wolfe said, "but strategic. And strategic people do not mail sensitive documents from predictable locations." And yet, she mailed it from a box near her building. Uncharacteristic. He leaned back. "Unless the recipient wasn't you." Leslie's mouth parted slightly. Wolfe continued more slowly now. "What if she sent that letter now, as a warning to you, but as a message too? Iran, a bluff, a feint she wanted him to find it, wanted him to believe. She told someone everything, but why?" Leslie stacked. "Because," Wolfe said, "she'd already realized she was being watched. She suspected Martian or someone in his orbit was stealing her work, so she made a play. She sent a list of names, knowing Martian would try to retrieve it, and when he failed, she waited to see what either do." Leslie leaned in, her voice lower now, "But she died." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and that is what troubles me. The timing." He closed his eyes for a moment, then reopened them. "Miss Goring, you told me, didn't see Gillian the week she died." "That's right, and yet you had her spirit key." Her eyes narrowed. "She gave it to me months ago, for emergencies." "Did she consider this an emergency?" Leslie didn't answer right away. I didn't interrupt. I was watching her fingers, how they gripped the chair arm, like she was holding something down that wanted to claw its way up. "She never told me about the letter." she said. Not directly, no, Wolfe agreed, but she knew you'd find it because she made sure of it. Wolfe paused after Moran confronted her after he failed to find the envelope. He must have returned. He pushed her, yes sir. Perhaps he simply startled her near the stairs. Either way, he caused her death, but the panic came. After Bekaza didn't know how much she'd shared, that uncertainty was fatal to his confidence, but the police called it an accident. Leslie whispered, yes, because it looked like one. Jillian had prepared for everything except the possibility that her bluff would cost her life. He turned his head, but someone went into her apartment. After her death, someone used a spare key. Someone found her notice or drafts her backup plans and took them. Leslie's face palled. You didn't mean to obstruct, Wolfe said. But you did. You went and saw the remnants offer plan and panicked. You thought if the wrong person saw what she'd written, sought what she'd guessed, they'd come after you next. Leslie shook her head. I didn't destroy anything, no, Wolfe sagely. You simply didn't share it because you didn't yet know who to trust. It's why you brought the letter instead of the files you were testing USD, same way she tested Moran. He sat forward now. This Goring, your sister, was not reckless. She was careful. She was building a web. The tragedy is that Martian cut the web before it could hold. Leslie looked at me. Would it have changed anything if it came sooner? No, I said, but we might have had fewer Shadasto chase. She swallowed. I didn't mean to lie. Wolfe shook his head. You didn't, but too withheld out of fear, which is often the handmaided den of guilt. He waved a hand. You're not culpable, but you're part of the story, and now you must decide how it ends. What do you mean? Martian may not serve time, but he will be exposed. Your testimony will strengthen the case, or you may choose silence. Leslie looked down at her hand. She tried to do it all alone. Yes, Wolfe said, and paid for it. I won't make the same mistake. Good. She stood slowly. Then she said, I thought I came here for justice. I think what I really came for was the truth that Wolfe said was what your sister wanted most of all after she left. I poured Wolfe a beer. He accepted it, which meant the case was done formally, if not emotionalier, not satisfied. I said, leaning on the desk, no, because there's no punishment. No, he said, because there's no restoration. I do not like way Starshine and Jillian Goring had potential. She also had a plan. Yes, Wolfe said, quietly, but it required others to see it through, and that is always the fatal variable. 3 days after the final gathering, the brownstone returned to something approximating normal by that. Wolfe resumed his usual monastic rituals, orchid hours in the mornings, 3 gourmet meals timed with military precision, a globe of beer every afternoon at 6 o'clock, and a complete unwillingness to entertain anyone not bringing either a fine vintage or a significant Femi. I was still catching my breath, not from any physical effort, Lord knows there hadn't been much of that, but from the emotional wreckage the Goring case had left behind for emissary, without a gun, a screen, or a body in the parlor. Okay? It had managed to stir up more moral grime than most shootings have handled. And the worst part, no one really. One Leslie Goring gave her statement. 2 Kramers short and clean, she confirmed. Haven's admission and helped the Deace office build a timeline. Kramer told me Martian had lawyered up, but the grand jury was interested. Won't be an easy conviction, he said, but there's blood in the water now. Peter Havens disappeared into some legal purgatory cell, talking to the feds about financial misrepresentation, still waiting to see which side would punish Hemor Rowan. Bain returned to her pastry kitchen. A local blog ran a profile offered too. Days after everything hit the news, the chef who knew too much, the Calla did. She didn't respond to press inquiries, which might be the wisest choice. Shits made in years, and Wolfe, he orchestrated it all from that salmon leather throne, as unmoving as a statue of Zeus on a rest day, and yet as central to the storm as the eye of a hurricane. Now that the noise had passed, he was quieter than usual, reflective, not mournful. He doesn't mourn, but contemplative. the way a man reflects on a particularly fine meal that ended with a slightly underwhelming dessert on their fourth night. We were sitting down to a dinner of duck confit with orange glaze and wild rice when Wolfe finally spoke of it a tragedy. "Without violence," he said, slicing through the duck with surgical care. "That's generous," I replied. "You push a woman down a flight of stairs. I called that violence." "Huh." He made a face. "The push was incidental. The tragedy was structural." I raised an eyebrow. "You're going to have to walk me through that one." Wolfe dabbed his mouth with his napkin. "Moran did not kill her out of hate. He killed her because her refusal to pretend his illusion. That is the nature of pride. It collapses when contradicted." "I let that hang," he continued. "She played his game too long. Knew the rules were changing, but she didn't exit quickly enough. That is what I find wasteful." I nodded. "She wanted to beat him at it." "No," Wolfe said. "She wanted to win without becoming him, a noble aim, but one that rarely succeeds." I poured U.S. both another glass of wine. "You don't think she could have outsmarted him?" "She nearly did." Wolfe said the letter was her checkmate, but she assumed the threat would end at fear she underestimated. How McDamage pride will inflict to preserve itself, that wasn't. Philosophy that whilst experienced Wolfe has seen it too often, Wolfe has seen, so have I. I said, "Leslie asked me if it was worth it." He glanced at me. "What did you say that you'd tell her?" "It was because truth is never wasted," he gave, short satisfied. Indeed, the next morning I found Wolfe in the plant rooms, which is how I knew something still sat heavy in his mind. Rarely invites me there unless he's got a notion. He's not done thinking through. I stood quietly as he adjusted a Miss Nozzle over a cluster of passiopetalums. "Archie," he said, "do you know why she brought a casserole?" I gave that one a moment because she wanted us to feel what she'd felt like someone close had crossed a line. He nodded. Food is intimacy in that world, her sister's world. Meals are both offerings and tactics. Jillian fed, Marshall, Leslie fed. Each dish was a plea, and the salt spill he turned from the orchids. That was not a threat. That was a statement. I waited. She, whoever entered, chose salt backouts. It preserves, not poisons. It was a message. This isn't over. You think someone else is still out there? No, he said, but the ripple continues Rowan Mayos. It in her redemption. Arcavans will find a new master Martian, if convicted will inspire a dozen copycats who believe. Charm absolves treachery in Leslie. She will carry her sister's unfinished ambitions. Like a dish left uncovered, that one lingered eye, said nothing. Wolfe turned back to the orchid's humans. Archie are too prone to seasoning justice with vengeance and calling it flavor. I grinned. You going to put that on a greeting card? He gave me a look then to be flippant. Then, let me ask you this. Did we win? No, he said. We merely clarified the loss that night. There were no visitors, no phone calls, no fuss for its preferred. A poached pear with a clove syrup glaze for dessert, and Wolfe pronounced it satisfactory with the air of a king forgiving a minor betrayal. As filed away the last of Thocay's notes in the cabinet behind my desk, I glanced over at him. He was reading a book on ancient kitchen rituals, or pretending to either way. His face was blank, but not empty. I've been thinking, I said. Disturbing, he muttered, without looking up. I think we solved a murder that didn't want to be solved. Jillian treated to keep it. Buried on her term's hand, Leslie. She wanted closure, not consequences. Wolfe folded a page that is often the nature of resolution. Each requires tolerance for ambiguity. Still, I'm glad we cracked at ease. Then, after a long moment, Wolfe said, there is something uniquely human in how we ruin each other gently. And with that, he stood miraculously, a bededded word. The dining room, I watched him go, then turned off the desk lamp. Sometimes you close a case and it feels like slamming a door. Other times it feels like walking out of a kitchen where something's still cooking and you just hope someone else knows when to take it off the heat.